A video made by Alberto Basil. A Tibetan legend says that one day the god Vishwakarma descended from the sky and deposited on Mount Jephel the oldest representation of a deity. It is the statue of a giant whose hermetic smell contains the expression of all the idols of the world. These giants are the ancient astronauts quoted in the mythologies of the whole world in different ranks. These giants are called Anunnaki by the Sumerians, Elohim by the Hebrews, Theoi by the Greeks, Deva by the Indians, and by other names according to the place. Endowed with a very advanced technology, these giants are 600 male and female. Their life expectancy is 1,000 years, and they usually use genetic modification and cloning because they need labor for their camp. The giants create for a certain time, for a certain period, strange creatures, byproducts of genetic tests, which they ended up by eliminating them when they made their best product, humans. They cloned thousands of them and finally create women, so that these new creatures multiply on their own. Now, having workers, the giants share the world, each forming a nation, but since their character is warlike, they go to war over territorial issues. The first humans, they revere these giants who created them and believing them as gods, but the relationship is not cordial. These gods provide food like any breeder, but treat humans like cattle and strike the disobedient. In this team of astronaut explorers, each giant is a technician specialized in a specific discipline. There is the god of fire, Vulcan, who forged the lightning of Zeus, the god of wind, Aeol, the god of water, Neptune, the god of medicine, Asclepios, the god of war, of course, Mars, and the others. On a mission far from their planet, these gods like to relax getting drunk on barley beer. Beer is invented in Egypt by the god Osiris, who makes it in a temple hidden at the mouth of the Nile to keep it secret. The beer gets to Sumer, where the goddess Inanna offers it to the priests in her temple at Dorak. In Sicily, the Greek goddess Demeter cultivates barley herself and produces the cerevisia, beer, venerated by the Romans. Beer is declared a state monopoly by Pharaoh Seti. His son Ramses II prescribed a tribute each year for the temple of Dendera, home of the mother goddess, Mother Hathor. In Babylon, the code of Hammurabi designs for beer the first price ceilings in history. In addition to drinking, these gods love to inhale smoked fat. To get in touch with them, just start a fire and sacrifice an animal. Attracted by the smell, the gods inevitably arrive and rewards the offerers to the point of eliminating their opponents. Among the female giants, all of the most famous of high ranking are the Sumerian goddess Ishtar, the Egyptian goddess Hathor and Isis, the Greek goddess Athena, and many others. They reign over their territory by establishing the matriarchy. The year lasts 364 days and it is divided into 13 lunar months of 28 days like the menstrual cycle. The succession to the throne is made by a female, and in the 13th month the queen sacrifices a king, where the superstition of the number 13 comes from. In the matriarchy, women are protected by a very strong conception of chastity or dedicated cults to the virgin goddesses up to the Madonna. Among the goddesses, the mother goddess is the most revered. Her image is the lunar trinity with the growing moon of the virgin goddess Athena, the full moon of the goddess Aphrodite, and the waning moon of the goddess Hera. This trinity is symbolized by the mask of the Gorgon, a woman wearing snakes who frightens those who look at her. This intention of frightening comes from the fact that one day the Virgin Athena undergoes a mishap, wearing only a shield on which is painted the Gorgon. Athena needs armor and therefore visits the god Vulcan in his foundry of the Etna, so they can make one for her. Vulcan was already giving her a lustful look at the young virgin, and it seized the opportunity to get ready to rape her. But Athena raises her shield, and the Gorgon frightens Vulcan so much that she managed to escape. Since then, young Mediterranean girls wear a chastity tunic on which the Gorgon is painted to terrorize men who are trying to attack their virginity. In Europe, the matriarchy declines when a Hyperborean people leave present Estonia and arrive at the Mediterranean, invading the islands between the Aegean and Ionian. These people are the ancient Greeks. Homer recounts the gesture of their gods, the theory, but the events he cites took place in the Baltic and not in Greece, where there is no midnight sun nor ice. This invasion brings male solar worship. The king takes full power and transmits the inheritance of the male son. When the king dies, a ceremony renews his life. For a day, a substitute king reigns in his place, and the evening after having consumed his last meal, he is sacrificed. The substitute and the king's flesh are then eaten, and their blood is scattered on the fields to fertilize them. In India, in the liturgical feast of Chakra Puja, 12 participants, under the guidance of a master, are drinking the blood of the goddess Shakti and eating the flesh of the god Shiva in the same Eucharistic ceremony as the Last Supper of Jesus. This ancient tradition inspired the sacrifice of Christian Easter by the need for death, so that life can be renewed. Among the dying gods, offering themselves as a sacrifice to come back in a new life, there is the Egyptian god Osiris, the Babylonian god Tammuz, the Mayan god Quetzalcoatl, and so many others, up to Christ, the redeeming God of Christians. The performances of these giant gods, who never die and who come and go from the sky aboard noisy floats, make men fantasize and are imagining a divine world where everything is possible. They then invent miracles, paradise, hell, resurrection, reincarnation, and even eternal life. But the higher God of the Bible, the Elohim, Elyon, does not agree with these human rantings. He affirms that the gods die like men and animals, and that all living beings will disappear to nothingness, because there is nothing before each life and nothing after. The Bible is a set of texts written by the Hebrews after their exile in Babylon. In this crossroads of cultures, the Hebrews meet the disciples of Zoroaster and remain so convinced by their notion of the unique God that they decide to found a Hebrew monotheistic religion. The Hebrews already have a God of Elohim, Yahweh, and trust him. Yahweh once guided them from Sumer to the promised land, and will not abandon them now in the Babylonian exile. Indeed, it only elapses a generation, and the Hebrews return to Judea, rebuild the temple of Jerusalem, and constitute their monotheistic religion. The Hebrews know that the Elohims are many, but they proclaim Yahweh as the only God, creator of heaven, earth, and man, and compose the Hebrew Bible, manipulating their ancient texts which they adapt to the monotheistic version. In their Bible, God created man from a handful of clay. However, the creation of the woman is much more laborious. God must anesthetize Adam, extract stem cells from him, and suture the cut to create Eve. While the only gods surfaced in Palestine, in Greece at that time, the gods were denied, and Greek scholars explained the body, the psyche, and death rationally. At the same time, in Nepal, Buddha perceives the man as an eternal spirit which lives various stages, of which one is the human condition. In China, Lao Tzu preaches confidence in nature, and in Tao, the perfect balance that supports the universe. The intertwining links between the traditions of the world are very numerous. The Chinese yaksha correspond to the satires of European mythology. The Indian Bodhisattva correspond to the angels and the Christian saints. Buddha is represented like a Greek god, and Jesus is one of the many gods who becomes a man. Indeed, 3,000 years before Jesus Christ, several gods were embodied as men. The Indian god Jesus Krishna is born of a virgin by divine transfer, escapes the massacre of children, preaches good, dies, resuscitates, and uses his technology to work miracles. In Greece, the god Dionysus visits the kingdom of the dead, transmutes water into wine, dies, and resuscitates. Egypt also has his god who becomes a man. It is Horus, son of the virgin Isis, Egyptian goddess of the moon, wrapped in a blue coat studded with stars. He was born on December 25th in a cave. His birth is announced by a star, and the event is awaited by 3 kings. Horus receives gold, frankincense, and myrrh. He is baptized at the age of 30 by Anup, the builder, who will be beheaded. Is followed by 12 disciples, fights for 40 days in the desert against Seth, the wicked, delivers sermons, dies, resuscitates after 3 days, and uses his technology to resuscitate Lazarus and to walk on water. Represented by a cross, forming the Egyptian divine triad, Horus is seated as the Messiah and the anointed Son of God. Around year 0, Yahweh is still the Elohim of the Hebrew people, but with the Roman occupation of Palestine, he fears being chased by the Elohim of the Romans, more powerful than him. He then prepares a Jewish rebellion against the Romans. He orders his archangel Gabriel to graft Elohim DNA on Jewish women so that they generate superior men. In the Old Testament, Yahweh had already sent Gabriel to Jewish women, and they had given birth to twins, like multiple births, in vitro deliveries. Now Yahweh orders Gabriel to intervene on the cousin of Virgin Mary, Elizabeth, who generates John Baptist, and on the Virgin Mary, who generates twins, Yeshua and Thomas. The time of a generation elapses, and the Jewish rebellion is ready. John the Baptist recruits the agitators, binding them by the oath of baptism. Yeshua trains them to fight against the Roman troops, and his comrade Peter, is in charge of financing. Yeshua is also called Barabbas, which means Son of God, because the rebels know it is an emissary of the God Yahweh. And when John the Baptist is beheaded, it is Yeshua who continues the fight, gathering crowds and thus finding new adherents. However, Peter's actions worried the rebels. Peter kills a couple on the spot who has not given him all of their possessions, and this scares the rebels and especially Judas, who warns the Romans. A regiment of Syrian auxiliaries paid by Rome, 500 armed soldiers, will then arrest the dangerous rebel leader Yeshua Barabbas. His twin Thomas looks so much like him that Judas must kiss Yeshua so that the soldiers are not mistaken. The prefect of Judea, Pontius Pilate, condemns Yeshua Barabbas to crucifixion like the insurgents, but the rebels wait for the soldiers to leave, bribe the guards, and remove Yeshua, still alive, from the cross, hide him in a private cave, and at night bring him in a safe place. Roman repression then becomes bloody. Jerusalem is on the verge of being destroyed, and the rebels are fleeing. Very old books that have escaped the fire of the Red Guard of Mao Zedong attest that Yeshua Barabbas took refuge in the Tibet, and he remained there for 10 years. His twin Thomas, known for the story of the finger in the wound, escapes in India, and his tomb still exists. The Portuguese landed in the south of India in the 16th century testified of this. Faced with the failure of his rebellion, the Elohim Yahweh disappears forever, and the Jewish priestly class fears of being dissolved by the Romans. The Jewish priestly class then conceived a new Jewish religion more appropriate to the Greek-Roman audience and entrusted the realization to a Roman Jewish scholar, the notable Paul of Tarsus. But Paul is a visionary. He chooses as God of this new religion the Jew, Son of God, Yeshua Barabbas, condemned 50 years ago by Pontius Pilate. He is a rebel. The Romans will never accept him as a god, so Paul, as a strike of genius, he invented two distinct characters, Yeshua and Barabbas. Barabbas is the rebel liberated by Pilate, and Yeshua is the new martyr god who sacrifices himself to save humanity. Paul uses the Eastern tradition to straighten Commission religion, but when the Jews realize that he wants to make Yeshua a new god, they accuse him of blasphemy and want to imprison him. Peter even wants to kill him, but Paul escapes by the sea. He takes refuge in Greece and continues his idea. He first changes the name Yeshua to Jesus, associating him with the Greek god Zeus. Then, still confident of the effectiveness of Eastern traditions, he completes it in Jesus Christ to associate to associate it with the Indian god Jesus Krishna. Finally, Jesus Krishna. Finally, inspired by the divine triad, Paul makes a mixture of the lives of Krishna, Horus, and Dionysus, and thus composes the life of Jesus Christ as it is described in the Gospels. Nothing to do with the Joshua Barabbas who did exist. Paul doesn't stop there. He changes the Hebrew Bible so that it announces the coming of Christ. He invents eternity, the original sin, the sending of Jesus on the earth, his sacrifice to atone for the sins of the world, and his resurrection. Paul does a good job, since this mixture of the most effective Oriental traditions touches a multitude of hearts. Indeed, its version gives birth to the Christian religion, and the faith of its faithful is so strong that the Roman polytheists, after having persecuted the Christians, embrace Christianity and even get baptized. However, around the year 300, a debate animated the scholars. Yusef, the Christian bishop of Caesarea in Palestine, believes that God inspired the Bible, but the Greek philosopher Porphyry does not agree. Porphyry contends that the Bible is a misleading copy of the manuscript of Jerubbaal, the successor of Moses. In this very ancient work, there is no God nor eternity, but only events related to the relationship between certain extraterrestrials from heaven and certain leaders of the Hebrew Bible. Ancient Indian, Chinese, and Central American texts cite the same type of relationship, but conventional thinking Western considers these writings as fantasies. Today, with public education, accessibility to libraries, modern translation, genetic engineering, computers, internet, and especially with modern rationality, we can discern the authentic from the falsity of all of this. When then we discover that the actual sacred books are fraudulent copies of ancient writings, especially Sumerians, that each religion has adapted to its own requirements. The worst of all is that these adaptations are taking the extraterrestrial, the warlike extraterrestrial explorers for true spiritual gods, even advocating their worship. At the Vatican, comparative studies of ancient writings and the latest translation of the Bible abdicate a pope and force his successor, Pope Francis, to affirm that we should not take the resurrection of Jesus as a historic event, but as an act of faith. The Catholic clergy then defended their millennial privileges and accused Pope Francis of heresy for these proposals, contrary to divine truth. But modern scientists understand what their former predecessors could not even imagine, as space shuttles and genetic manipulation. Many concepts are clear today, In the light of these facts, a rational mind could therefore advance that until the proof of the contrary, the spiritual world religions is only a joke, and that the history of the extraterrestrials becoming gods, between commas, in the memory of the man is the only one which offers a rational explanation to the puzzles of proto-history and perhaps even to the origin of mankind. Anyway, this epic keeps us in suspense from start to finish is our distant past. A past full of surprises, whose twists and turns are always exciting, like the dramatic theater.